Hello, dear brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining Mother and Refuge at the End Times. What the prophecies reveal: that we can modify with prayer, fasting, and sacrifices. The Catechism of the Catholic Church affirms that the Church will follow the same steps of the Passion of its Lord, and in the year 2033, the 2000 years of the Crucifixion of Christ would be fulfilled. Also, the year 2030 is a key date, when it is assumed that the enemies of the Lord will have their entire program deployed. Are there prophecies from heaven that are pointing towards those dates? And in any case, what do they say? There are, and they seem very clear. Here we will analyze the prophecies that refer to those dates and that are related to the request for the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, which Our Lady made in Fatima with the third secret, and other visions that Jacinta, the most famous visionary, had, the little one from Fatima, all of which converge. Between May the 13th and October 13th, 1917, Our Lady appeared in Fatima, Portugal to the three little shepherds, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, in the manifestation that is considered the key to understanding everything that is happening in the world now. The events we see in the world bring us more light on these apparitions. On July the 13th, 1917, Our Lady of Fatima promised to return to ask the Holy Father and all bishops to consecrate Russia to her Immaculate Heart. And so it is that on June the 13th, 1929, the Holy Trinity and the Virgin appear to Sister Lucia in Tui, and Mary tells her, "The time has come when God asks the Holy Father, in union with all the bishops of the world, carry out the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart, promising salvation by this means." In a 1930 letter to her confessor, Father Jose, Sister Lucia explains that the Lord promises to end the persecution of Russia if the Holy Father deigns to do so, and orders the bishops of the Catholic world to do likewise, a solemn public act of reparation and consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And if His Holiness promises to recommend the practice of the reparative devotion of the first 5 Saturdays, heaven's request is not fulfilled. But let us remember for later that June the 13th, 2029 will be exactly 100 years since the day on which the Holy Trinity and the Virgin Mary appeared to Sister Lucia. Now in August 1931, Lucia related to her bishop by letter a locution that our Lord made to her. He said, "Let my ministers know that they are following the example of the King of France, delaying the execution of my request, and that they will also follow him in misfortune. But it will never be too late to turn to Jesus and Mary." What was our Lord referring to? He was making explicit reference to the requests of the Sacred Heart made on June the 17th, 1689 to the King of France through St. Margaret Mary of Alacoque and their non-compliance. The desire was for the King to consecrate himself to the heart of Jesus, paint the Sacred Heart on the King's banners and engrave it on his arms, having a building erected in which there will be an image of the Divine Heart to receive the consecration and homage of the King and the entire court, to have the Mass authorized by the Holy Apostolic See and obtain all other privileges that must accompany devotion to his Divine Heart. Neither Louis XIV nor his successors Louis XV and Louis XVI fulfilled this request, and exactly 100 years later, on June the 17th, 1789, the Protestant and Masonic forces carried out the great uprising of the French Revolution. The king lost his throne. And once imprisoned, Louis XVI remembered Jesus' request and consecrated France to his Sacred Heart. Being dethroned and imprisoned, he created and promulgated the act of consecration of France to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, but it was too late. And on January the 21st, 1793, Louis XVI was executed by guillotine. So, in Ariane's show, Jesus warns us through Sister Lucia that this dark chapter of history will repeat itself, and this time the ministers of his church will be among its hapless victims. Although in the end the church will fulfill the request, and it will be accepted, that does not make the penalty void. What happened to Louis XVI is strikingly similar to the execution of the Pope along with other bishops, priests, religious and lay people revealed in 2000 by the Vatican as the first part of the third secret of Fatima. The vision begins with the image of a bishop dressed in white, seen as if against the light, and it continues with the vision of a pope who climbs a steep mountain together with other bishops, priests and laymen, at the top of which there was a large cross made of cork oak trunks. To get there, the Holy Father crossed a large half-ruined city with unsteady steps, afflicted by pain and sadness, and prayed for the souls of the corpses he found on his way. And having reached the top of the mountain, he was forced to kneel and was murdered along with his companions by a group of soldiers who shot him with bullets and arrows. This vision of the Pope is complemented by 2 visions that Jacinta had and that Sister Lucia relates in her third Memories. In the first vision, he saw the Holy Father in a very large house, kneeling before a table with his hands on his face and crying. Outside the house there were many people, and some threw stones at him, others cursed him, and said many ugly words to him. In the second vision he saw roots, roads and fields full of people crying from hunger and having nothing to eat, and to the Holy Father in the church praying before the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and all those people pray with him. These visions can be taken not only in a physical sense, but also in a spiritual sense, and would reveal things that would happen both outside and inside the church. And what can we conclude from all these prophecies? That the failure of the pontificate to comply with the consecration of Russia in a timely manner caused evils to grow in the world, and even within the church, because in another video we have suggested that the bishop dressed in white of the vision of the third secret of Fatima is an impostor pope, not a true one. Then it seems that the moment will come 100 years after the request for consecration, when the pontificate will receive the retribution that the King of France had, whose late consecration did not exempt him from the penalty. 100 years after the request for the consecration of Russia takes us to 2029, and the execution of the king happened 4 years after being deposed. So we could provisionally hypothesize that the evils of the world, the persecution and the conflicts within the church will escalate until 2029, and that from then on to 2033 will be the hardest phase. The Church will follow the steps of the Lord's Passion according to the Catechism, and let us remember that in 2030 the enemies will be consolidating their plan, and in 2033 it will be 2,000 years since the crucifixion of Christ. Well, here we wanted to talk about how the failure to consecrate Russia in a timely manner is the thermometer of the tribulation and could indicate the hardest moment, and its completion would be in 2033. Immaculate Heart of Mary, pray for us.